Okay, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us in this last meeting of the day. Welcome to the panel, Openfinance, Reshaping the Financial Sector Through New Rulings, Competitors, and Services. My name is Isabel Margarita Bravo, and as board member of Invest, I'm delighted to bring you another compelling topic that is central to our financial landscape. But before beginning with the panel, let me introduce to you some key concepts on this topic. The open finance system is already a reality in Chile, at least legally, since the fintech law came into effect in February 2023. The adoption of this system is very good news, great news for competition, for innovation, and for financial inclusion. The possibility of setting aside one of the main barriers to financial industry, such as the control of clients' financial information, will allow many entities to effectively compete in this market. Moreover, people will gain greater control over their financial information and will be able to put it to work in their favor. Thus, financial institutions and fintechs will be able to offer financial services much more tailored to the needs of individuals and companies. Finally, we could also see progress in terms of financial inclusion, since groups and the population that haven't been attended could improve their quality of life through accessing to new financial services. However, I have to say that the system is currently facing a critical phase for its success: its implementation. Although this implementation ultimately rests on the regulatory powers of the regulator, it essentially depends on the success of a conversation and articulation between public and private entities, such as banks, credit card issuers, fintechs, and the Financial Market Commission, the regulator, that must agree on the details of technical, operational, and organizational standards so that this system could turn into a true reality in Chile. For this conversation, we have amazing panelists today with us, all key players of the fintech ecosystem in Chile and in the UK, who will allow us to deepen into those aspects in which there is already progress, those in which is still work to do, and to discover which or will be the most sensitive aspect to make this great initiative work. So now I turn to Tomás Pintor. He is partner at BitLaw and former advisor to the Ministry of Finance of Chile for the fintech law, who will moderate the panel. Please give a warm applause to welcome the panel and let the discussion begin.
So, first of all, I want to thank Invest and all the organizational team for the invitation, of course. As a former advisor at the Ministry of Finance, I was lucky enough to participate in the drafting of what is now the FinTech and Open Finance Law, and led the legislative process in the National Congress. And as you imagine, this is quite a important panel, an exciting one for me to listen because of the participants that we have. Here on my left, we have Solange President. She's the president of the Financial Market Commission, the Chilean financial regulator. We have Daniel Hochman, president of Banco del Estado de Chile, the bank that has the most number of accounts held in the industry. Alan Ainsworth, head of policy of the Open Banking Implementation Entity, or OBIE. And Valentina Pacheco, VP of Growth and Development at Floyd, a Chilean fintech that provides services in the field of open finance. So maybe you can give them a warm applause. Since they are the most important and influent actors in this very important process that we're living in Chile. So maybe we can start with Solange. How do you think, Solange, the CMF has faced the implementation phase, and what changes have you created, and how much are yet to come, other instances? And on another side, what issues do you think are the most relevant to solve or to face in this implementation process?
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction, Tomas, and thank you again for the invitation to be part of this panel. Indeed, this is a very important challenge for CMF. We have been working on the implementation of the FinTech law, which part of it is open finance. So we have already run like more than 30 different workshops with the private sector in order to draft the first set of regulation that's going to be issued, we hope, by the end of October or November in terms of the FinTech law in general. And just to remember that this law has as the main goal to have innovation, financial inclusion, promote competition in the financial sector. So for us, it's a very important goal, and it's very in line with one of our mandates, because as it was remembered, I think it was this morning, as CMF, we do have a triple mandate. We have a prudential mandate, a market conduct mandate, and also a market development mandate as well. So in that sense, indeed, this law was promoted by the financial regulator. Basically, what open finance allows is to have exchange information between financial service providers, and this personal information becomes an asset for the person itself. So it's a change in way we think about the digital footprint of people. That someone in the room told me that concept this morning, and I think it's very useful in this case, because this digital footprint now is an asset of the person itself and not of the financial service provider. And that makes a big difference between what we are used to see in the market. So now, as now the financial clients do have the power to take that information and ask for the best service that suits them. And I think that is very, very important. So that's the basic principle. Each customer is owner of their own information. And we have, let me show you one slide. One slide. Yeah. So to show you a little bit about what's going to be our roadmap, or what has been our roadmap until now. So we started the implementation of the FinTech law this year, and we have been working on open finance, even if we haven't until now called for the workshops. That doesn't mean that we have not worked on open finance until now during the whole year, and even before the law was approved, because this is a law in which we started working in the implementation before the law was approved by Congress, because otherwise we would not be able to meet the timeline that we have to meet. That was the one that was set by the specific law here. So we had 18 months to issue all the regulation. So we started with the first set of regulation that's going to be issued in this 18 months. And the open finance system, we have to understand it as a continuous process. Indeed, we have learned by talking with different jurisdictions that have implemented open finance. This is a continuous process. So we would start then with the licensing by the second semester of next year. We'll start the licensing of the payment initiators, and start also in 2024 the first stage of the implementation of the open finance system. But this requires a lot of previous work in order to be able to be there by mid-2024 to be able to start the implementation and running of the system. There's a lot of work to be done during this year and the first half of next year. And we will also require a lot of interaction with the private sector in a different way than the one that we usually, as regulator and supervisor, do. So we needed a different hat somehow, because previously we just had the hat of a regulator or the hat of supervisor, and now we need to have the hat of the friend, a more friendly hat to the private sector to approach what are their needs in order to have an effective development. But without forgetting that we are still the regulator and supervisor of the financial sector, and that still we do have the other two mandates to take care of: financial stability and market conduct, consumer protection. So we still need to have that very much in mind in our interaction with the private sector. So for that, what we have done is that we have changed a little bit our organizational structure, and we now have a unit that's called Financial Hub, Financial Innovation Hub for the CMF. And that Financial Innovation Hub, it just has 3 people, a leader and 2 staff, but has the whole institution working for them, and they have to coordinate action from different areas of the Financial Market Commission. But those are the people that they have the unique task of somehow connecting with the private sector through a different channel than the one that we usually have. So we just hired the person that's going to lead this, it's Claudia Sotelo. She comes from the central bank, and she started like a couple of weeks ago. But we are already having some meetings with the private sector and organizing the workshops for open finance. So she's just coming in, the CMF, at the time that we will start with the workshops to go through all the rules that we will need to issue for the implementation of open finance. So we'll start our workshops by the end of this month or starting the next month. And those workshops will look at issues like governance. That's a very important piece of how we are going to implement the open finance system. In this case of Chile, we have to define a governance. So on those workshops, what we're going to do is we will come up with a proposal for the private sector of how we think things should work, and then we'll have the opinion and comments and discussion on the basis of a starting point. That's our proposal, but that's a starting point. And then we have to have that discussion with the private sector. So the first going to be governance, then the type of information that's going to be shared, then the technology that's going to be used to share that information, etc. So that is going to be very, very important for us. But some of the steps were taken at an early stage. As I mentioned, we don't start with the workshops. Indeed, we're able now to go with a specific proposal for these workshops. For each of these themes that we are going to address with the private sector, we are coming up with a starting point with the proposal. The same we did with the previous ruling for the fintech law, indeed, for the workshops that we already did, for the rules that we are going to issue during the next month. We did the same thing. We started with the proposal, and then we started the discussion, and now we're going to come up with a draft that's going to be put into public consultation. So what are the things that we did in order to be prepared? In order to have a proposal for the private sector? We did have meetings with the private sector, of course, bilateral kind of meetings with some of you, not many, but some of you here in the room and some others. But we also held a lot of meetings and discussions and read a lot about what's going on in other jurisdictions, like the case of Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and the UK. In the UK, we came last year, indeed, and we met with many people here in the UK and learned a lot of those conversations. So we are starting. Open finance is still kind of new, but it's less new than 5 or 10 years ago, of course. So we have to learn about that experience in order to have our system ongoing. We also got technical assistance from the World Bank, which has been very important, and we're very grateful for that. And they will continue supporting our work in the future. And we have somehow we do have a legal framework, which is kind of strong and flexible, but still we need to learn about the international experience, get our framework, know our reality, because now this is something that is already taking place. In the case of Chile, we do have open finance ongoing somehow. We have little pieces in there. So it's something that it's already somehow working there. And now we have to organize it in a different way. So what are the next steps? As I mentioned, we have to launch these open finance consultation workshops. So that's going to be by the end of the month. What are the main challenges that we are facing? We have a very adjusted calendar in order to be able to address and get out our first general standards. And those general standards, we have to see how prescriptive we are going to be and how much we will let the private sector to agree on. What are the private sector is going to agree on? And if they are not agreeing on something, well, how much we will have to say, well, just this is the field where you have to play, and this is the rules. And how prescriptive we are going to be depends a lot on how much agreement we can have on the private sector on the best way to go. But we know that there are different interests, from the part of different private sector members or participants. Other challenges have to do with this gradual implementation. As I mentioned here in this timetable, this is an ongoing process. So we start with some entities, basically with banks and payment initiators as part of the system. But then we have to move forward for new participants, other participants in the market, other kind of information that's going to be shared. So we have to go step by step, making the system larger somehow with more participants, more information, but we have to go really step by step. Some other challenges have to do with the technology. We think that that is pretty much solved internationally. It seems that it was a big issue before, but nowadays there's more consensus on what's the type of technology that should be used. Liability and mechanisms to solve controversies. So there's a lot of potential conflicts and different opinions between participants, and we'll have to deal with that. So we think that's going to be difficult as well. Security standards, then again, if we put too much security standards or they're too costly, maybe when we will leave everyone out, so we have a system that it's empty. So we'll have to see how that works. Issues like web scrapping, things are already happening. What are we going to do with that's something that we don't have an answer yet. What are we going to do with web scrapping, for instance, for example? So a lot of things, a lot of issues that we will have to address, and we hope to have a good dialogue with the private sector in order to get the best standard possible and a good arrangement for people to be able to use the system and have financial inclusion and achieve the goals that are behind this law.
Amazing work, the one that the CMF has done with the previous workshops and the ones that are coming. Thank you very much, Solange. It's very important to note that new form of dialogue that the CMF must create with the private sector, right? This special public policy that is the open finance. Daniel, you are well known as a bank in Chile. We use the term bancarization for financial inclusion, for having this cuenta root that is, I think we are in 11 millions of cardholders, maybe, or more. Closer to 15, imagine that. And what are the main benefits that you as Banco Estado see in the open finance, and how do you see the disposition of the other banks in front of it?
So let me start by thanking the opportunity and the generous introductions by Isabel and Tomas. I'm delighted to be in this wonderful city and so as you were mentioning, Banco Estado is a bit of a strange animal. It's a bank that operates in the commercial sector under the regulation that all banks must comply. But on the other hand, it has a public mandate, and this is very visible in how it has displayed its strategy. And so let me step back a little bit and from this public perspective, basically try to make an assessment of why open finance and more generally digital finance or digital services are important for the country. So as Solange was saying, there's a crucial part which is related to the financial sector, and it's about inclusion and competition and so on. But it's also, I think, about inclusion in the digital dimension. So it's about bringing small enterprises and people who are not participating in the digital economy as well. And on the other hand, it's also, and this is something that I think is one of the things I want to highlight the most, it's also about innovation. And I truly believe that, as the Minister of Finance said a few hours ago, that Chile is in a juncture, that we're at a turning point, and we are likely, I'm an optimist, to really step forward and become a more developed country. And part of it is basically developing sectors that are more intensive in knowledge and innovation. And so I think that this is a big chance for Chile as well. There's a big chance of having an innovation cluster around open finance and digital finance. We have a burgeoning innovation ecosystem. We have a young-minded generation of entrepreneurs. Some are not that young, but they're young-minded, and we have great geeks. I come from the engineering school, and I can basically say from firsthand that the best scientists and engineers and also IT professionals in Chile are comparable to people that basically go to the best universities in the world and so on. And so I think we truly have an innovation opportunity from a global perspective. And so I think that's something that I wanted to highlight. Let me here. So what is the open finance and the fintech promise around the world? It's related to inclusion, it's related to innovation, sometimes disruptive, sometimes associated to improvements in quality. Disruptive means that basically markets can be reshaped. In Africa, fintechs basically ended up developing the financial market that wasn't there to begin with. And people tend to emphasize this idea that it also brings competition. I prefer to emphasize the idea that it brings quality of services and efficiency. So I think that it's not necessarily related to more competition. It is somewhat related to competition, but it's also related possibly to collaboration. And this is associated to a wide range of opportunities which have played out very different in different countries, depending on the existing industry and on the regulation. And so there's the chance of deepening the market by basically providing traditional financial products, more different ways of savings, credit, insurance, and making this accessible to people that maybe haven't had access to this. There's non-traditional financial products, crowdfunding, crypto would be examples of this. There's also the possibility of providing services that are sometimes financial, associated to artificial intelligence or to business intelligence. And some of it are financial, some of them are just bundled to financial services. There's also been places where this has basically reshaped the means of payments and wallets and things like that. In some cases, it has redefined the industry boundaries by basically changing the integration, for example, of financial services as part of a broader type of service. And there's also, I think, and this is very important, associated to inputs, to intermediate services that may increase the value of the established players. Risk, security, authentications are things that existing banks need and are many times provided by these type of firms. So this is a general sort of view of what this type of innovations have brought to the world. And basically, I think an interesting issue is how will it play out in Chile? And the way in which it has played out in Africa, in India, or in China is very different than the way in which it has played out in Europe, for example, or in Brazil. And this has a lot to do with the level of maturity of the existing financial market, I think. And this basically shows a picture of the degree of bancarization as measured by the number of cards per person in Chile compared to other countries. And basically what the main idea here is that Chile has a level that is comparable to developed countries in terms of this measure. Importantly, this has been largely due to an innovation that Banco Estado introduced a couple of decades ago, a bit less, which is associating to a DNI an account. And this, I think, is an important innovation that it developed the market, that generated inclusion, dignity, etc. So this is more in line with your question. And so we're not starting from scratch. And this is something that will shape, I think, some of the things that will end up developing in Chile in an important manner. So what will happen in the end, I think, will depend on the gaps, the needs that the financial market has. It will depend on the attitude that traditional banks have, and will also depend on the regulation. And it's true that we have a very high level of financial inclusion from the point of view of access and use, but it's relatively low in terms of the diversity of products, financial products that people have. So people in Chile will have 1 or 2 products. Typically in Europe, they will have 10 products. And they will have more insurance and a number of other instruments. It's still true that there's low access for small and medium enterprises to credit. So there's more job to be done there, which this innovation can actually foster. There's low productivity and the digitalization of SMEs. And this is important because, as I mentioned in passing, some of the services that I think may be important are associated not necessarily to financial services, but to the bundling of financial services with other services, such as basically I have information about your account movements, I have information about your business movements, and using this information, I can provide a basic accounting system or different tools that may actually improve the management of SMEs beyond financial services. There's also, I think, a big, I think the assessment about the quality of service in Chile is that we are not doing so well. And so there's a lot of room to improve in terms of user experience. There are some questions about, there's now all of a big sort of flurry of different payment means and wallets that are appearing in Chile. It's unclear whether this will be also another issue. And I think that traditional banks or incumbents, the Chilean financial market being a relatively mature market, have high coverage. They are relatively trusted. I mean, people trust their money in these institutions. And it also has significant concentration, so that's something which needs improvement. And at the same time, banks have heterogeneous attitudes towards both these innovations, and some see it as a threat, others see it more as an opportunity, and they have different attitudes towards innovation, and at the same time, they have different IT capabilities. And so in the end, the way in which you see how this has played out in other countries depends a lot on the attitudes the banks or the existing incumbents have. Sometimes it's also insurance companies and so on. If these companies are willing to innovate, are willing to collaborate, are willing to be an enabler of this innovation, you basically will find that these banks will continue to be important in the market.
But Solange was saying in terms of the difficulty of making or building this new relationship with the with the different financial institutions, right? It depends on the disposition of the different financial institutions. But in that terms, Valentina, you as a company that will be regulated for the first time, how do you evaluate the existence of a regulatory framework, mandatory finance system?
Yes, perfect. Thanks for the question, Thomas. And also, I would like the opportunity to thank Chile Day for the invitation. It's an honor to be here sitting with these tremendous speakers. And I will be very brief on the answer of this question because we have a very clear stance on this matter. And it's that it is very positive for the industry to have a regulatory framework because it gives us guidelines, rules, and overall stability system that it's necessary for the implementation of open finance. It enhances authenticity methods, cybersecurity protocols, as Solange said, and well-defined data sharing procedures that are necessary for the growth of open finance in Latin America specifically, because this way it increases the confidence and the trust from the users of the system. So that's the first main reason I think it's very positive to have this. And also because there's a different reality in every country that we are in as Floyd. And the key for the success of an open finance fintech is also to navigate these cultural and evolving regulations between countries. So knowing the rules from the beginning and having a standardized way of doing things, it assures the success of the fintechs. And having this regulatory framework, it's not only good for the fintechs, also for all the industry. So that's.
Yeah, totally. It's the experience that you have, Alan, in the UK, right? A mandatory system that it was issued by a different regulator. That was the competition one. But why don't you tell us about your experience? Where maybe the first main advice that you would give maybe to the Chilean regulator, financial regulator, or to the banks?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. This is obviously my office most of the time. At Jest, I've been once before, and it's an amazing building, so a great venue. So I think
your microphone, you have it in your leg, in your legs.
It's fallen over.
Yes, there it is.
For now. So I think one of the things, and I think you're getting a lot right, which is the good news. I think the workshops are good. I think the way you're approaching it through a roadmap is good because this is tough to do and it does take time. So I think a lot of the stuff you're doing is well on track, and I have great admiration for the way you're dealing with this. One of the learnings we had is that you've got. I mean, we often talk about the single standard we have in the UK, and that's clearly important, so everybody knows what they've got to do and how they've got to comply with it. But what we found at the beginning of that process was that the single standard was focused on the technical. And actually, I think for you, the technical is probably going to be quite easy because you can borrow from others, right? However you choose to do that, you can go, well, we'll have that one. We didn't have that. But even if you don't have that, you can quite easily get technical people around a table, collaborate, and come up with the answer. So we thought that was going to be the difficult bit. Wasn't the difficult bit. The difficult bit about the single standard is getting the conformance around how it works for customer experience and performance. So you can implement that technical standard and the customer experience can be rubbish. And if the customer experience is not good, the customer will not use those products. So the intention of all of this is to get customers benefiting from the services the likes of you and others will be operating, whether that's SMEs or whether that's consumers. So making it usable, and I'm using deliberately simple language because if you want people to use this, it's got to be intuitive and easy and simple. And if you make the UX really clunky, as the original UK implementation was, and as the implementation in many parts of Europe has been, it doesn't look right. People won't use it. People won't pick it up. So it's about having that single standard, but extending that standard into customer experience. So making clear no replays of consent, no additional steps, no warnings, unnecessary warnings, you're talking about regulated organizations who have a right to access the customer's account. And therefore, it is not for the bank to go, are you really sure that you really want to do this? And adding additional layers in that journey, which make things really hard. Because initial implementations of open banking, which is what we've got in the UK, are actually generally quite basic implementations, account aggregation. The customer will use it if it's easy, but frankly, there's no massive drive to have account aggregation if you're a consumer. Getting a loan is different. Customer might want a loan, and therefore there's a bigger drive for that customer to get that loan. They might be prepared to put up with a little bit more, but often you've got to get that customer into that consent journey early and make it work, and consistently make it work. So user experience, absolutely vital to have in that standard. And a conformance regime that makes sure that the banks, dare I say it, conform to that regime and are not let off the hook because they comply with the regulation, they comply with the letter of the law. Because the letter of the law, as much as you might do a great job, will never capture everything. You don't know what good looks like until you've got good and you've got it out up front. The other big learning, I think, from our point of view is the role of an organization like us in terms of stewardship and leadership. So an organization that can promote open banking, but also can develop and bring people together to work out what good looks like and drive improvement and make decisions. So, and this is going to be the hardest part, is the decision making. As I mentioned, the technical bit became the easy bit. It's the extent to which you can push that, the UX, the performance, the availability on the banks. How much can you get away with in terms of what you're mandating them to do? So having some organization that can make a decision when you get policy decisions to make, not technical ones, to make a decision so you can move the whole debate forward. So what we were fortunate, and I think this was more by luck than by design in the UK, was that we created a governance model that ensured that when there was deadlock, a decision could be made. Because at the beginning of this process, it was a regulatory-led process. So quite reasonably, a bank will want to ensure that it complies with the regulation and, dare I say it, no more. So it's a good thing to have it in regulation, and banks will say we want it in regulation because we can get the budget if it's in there rather than if it's not in there. But sometimes the banks may not want to go much further than the letter of the regulation rather than the spirit. So being able to define that and redefine it and evolve it is really important. Bear in mind, the objective of this is to get more and more people using it and benefiting from it in such a way that their financial lives are made easier, they get better value, et cetera, et cetera. And small businesses increasingly are using it. So how's it going in the UK? And to be fair, I think you've got a lot of those things already planned. So I think what I've heard is really good. What I've heard from all three speakers so far is really positive and optimistic, I think, in terms of where you're going. Where we are so far is we've got roughly 7 to 8 million individual users in the UK. That's out of a digitally active population of around 40 odd million. We're talking about, therefore, 12%. What are they doing with open banking? They're typically, the original use cases were essentially migration from screen scraping. So there were use cases in SME accounts, online accounting. So it's a lot easier to use an API than to use screen scraping. So you got quick take up as those were converted. The obstacle in there is that our law is payment accounts only, because our origins are the European Payment Services Directive. And therefore, the only accounts that are required under our law are payment accounts. And the payment account definition is not up to us to define, it's in law to define, and every bank has a slightly different interpretation of what it is in and out of that law. So one bank might have a savings account included in their API, another bank might not. And clearly, if you're an SME, you want all of them in there, to be frank. So you might find if you're if you've got a loan account with one bank over there, that's probably definitely not included. The savings account may be included. The current account will be included. Now, of course, that's great because the current account is a source of most of the value of that financial accounting system, but not the only one. So we were lucky. We were set up to implement a requirement, and we had the leadership and stewardship piece, which allowed us to make decisions where we couldn't get agreement. So I think good stuff. The big challenge is how do you build from there? How do you take it to the next level and recognize the ecosystem as it is today rather than the ecosystem as it was in 2017 when all this was created? And it's different. Challenges emerge that we are currently not set up to deal with. So you end up with a bit of an impasse because we were set up as an implementation body to implement a particular requirement. And now we're at the stage of things are emerging as issues which we can't resolve. So that's a challenge of how do you ensure what you create is capable of evolving as demands of consumers and SMEs evolve too.
Governance is essential in that matter, right?
Yeah.
But let's put the concept to the ground. Maybe, Valentina, you can talk about innovative solutions that the Open Finance system promised to offer to us, or maybe some solutions or products that you in Florida are working, developing for in Chile or elsewhere?
Yes, well, some of it, all the panelists had said some about the innovations and solutions of Open Finance, but for those who didn't hear at the beginning or don't know the meaning, Open Finance, I like it to define Open Finance as a technology that allows individuals and businesses to share their financial information with others, such as banks, for example, in order to access to financial products online. So this, as a result, it increases the financial inclusion by including people who were previously excluded from the system, such as independent workers, freelancers, immigrants, and women, actually, and those who don't have a credit history. And this is possible because with the technology of Open Finance, you can have a more comprehensive view of your users by accessing information from different sources, such as banks, and having the information about the products that someone has in a bank account or the savings that someone has, and governmental sources and tax data. So the direct benefit for the banks, and Alan said it before, is that they can offer with this information more personalized products based on their users' behaviors and needs. So in Floyd, we work with 70% of the industry of banks, and we have several use cases. One use case that I like the most, it's actually with Banco Estado that is sitting here. And it's about the bank giving SMEs a management tool with a visual report of their finances in order to improve the decision-making for their businesses. So at the same time, the bank receives from the tax authority in Chile, that is Servicio de Impuestos Internos, the information of these SMEs, and they can provide them governmental-backed loans and give them more personalized products based on their specific needs. So you can correct me, Daniel, if I'm wrong, but the results are very positive in this. They have increased their credit prospects in a 20%, and 15,000 SMEs in Chile has been using this tool. And cases like this, we have many. This is only one use case, but we have had very positive outcomes from the industry. For example, also, they can deliver more quickly products because the conversion rates of Open Finance are better than credit bureaus. That is the traditional way of having a credit score. So in conclusion, you have these all benefits. And in my opinion, banks can not only look at the costs of the API's implementation, but also look at these benefits will emerge as winners in the industry. And in conclusion, there are several benefits. You can increase the financial inclusion. You can offer more personalized products based on your users' behaviors and needs. And this, of course, increases the customer loyalty for the brand also. And overall, you can improve your evaluation flows with positive information and deliver more quickly products for your audiences. So these are the main benefits and innovations.
Thank you for that, Valentina. Solange, do you think that there is in the open finance ecosystem, there is a specific product or business model that will prevail from others, or there is a portion of the industry that is better prepared than another portion of the industry?
As just has been mentioned, I do think that there's a lot of opportunities out there, and we are just in a starting point. But we're a starting point that doesn't start from zero. So there is a lot of business ongoing in our country as it is in other regions. And we do have some assessment or some view of what's going on in Chile. There is a survey that's conducted by Finovista and the IDB that give us a broad view of what's being done in the fintech space at the moment. The last survey that we have is from 2021, but there is an update that's coming out soon.
This year, right?
This year, yeah,
Okay.
very soon. We already have some results, but I cannot share still because they are dropped. But we already have that survey, and that's going to be published very, very soon. So, but we have the information from the last 2021. Cannot give the one that we have now, but the last one. And we do know that in the case of Chile, the payment sector has been very active in terms of the fintech industry. So we do have a very active payment environment in Chile with a lot of innovation taking place, even without open finance or open banking or anything like that. But creativity, innovation in our country seems to be flourishing pretty much. So those are some of the entities that will come into our regulatory space, and we have to see how this new environment is going to make the system more robust and able to have better products for people. Always thinking in the user case, of course. So it's like 23% of when you look at the fintech space, we have like 23% it's allocated to payment and remittances. There's also something that's very related to the payment system. Lending, it's also something that we have very active in the case of Chile. It's like 13% of what we see in the Finovista survey. It's like 13% it goes into lending. So we might end up having also some new models for the lending, for access to lending for people. So we look forward for the results that are going to come out, and let's see how that goes from there. But we think it's going to be very dynamic, and it depends a lot on the kind of information that's going to be available for people to share, and that should be dynamic. So again, we have to go step by step, I could say. We have to move in a way in which we give some guarantees for people. Data protection, it's very important. We haven't mentioned that until now, but I think that, of course, is very, very important. Data protection, cybersecurity, people to feel comfortable using the system. So not just the users having a use case or having a good experience, but the good experiences also go hand in hand with not being a victim of fraud or data leaks. Of course, that's very, very important, because otherwise we move 3 steps forward and 4 steps backwards, and this is not going to make any progress at all. So we need to take all the measures in order to have a robust system. So going step by step and including more information and more participants on the way forward is going to be important. We do see a lot of experiences in other jurisdictions in terms of the payment. I would say that is the one that has moved forward things more in other jurisdictions. It might be the case in the case of Chile as well. But there are also cases like the Brazilian case where they have open insurance. So we'll see how that works. Maybe in the insurance segment, there might be in the future, because this is going to be next stage in the future. But that can be something. It's not just it's payment, it's saving, it's lending, it's insurance. So we'll see.
Payment will be because these APIs are not able only to transfer information, but to make payments right from account to an account.
With payment initiators.
Payment initiation providers. Daniel, what use of cases, innovative use of cases you see coming in Chile with more strength than another?
Well, some of them were already mentioned by Valentina. I must state that as a public bank, even though we're a large bank, we see at least part of the bank is regarding itself as a large fintech. And basically this means that and let me go back to this idea that it depends a lot, the way in which this develops or plays out depends a lot on the attitudes of the incumbents, of the existing banks. And our attitude, I don't know the rest of the banks, but our attitude is basically to enable innovation, to foster an innovative ecosystem. And what that means is I think that there are great chances for collaboration. We have a very large client base, and we need to, we need and can improve significantly the quality of service and user experience by having alliances with new fintechs, which are incredibly agile to innovate. And actually, we're organizing a big part of the additional value that we want our customers to have as innovation challenges, where we explicitly invite fintechs to participate and provide solutions. And actually, the collaboration with Floyd came out of one of these innovation challenges. And more to the point, there's certainly a case of use associated to financial management. This is true for SMEs, as Valentina was saying, but it's probably also true with regards to personal finances and budgeting. There's the possibility of having alternative and agile scoring, credit scoring, which again is in line with this idea of having a more targeted product, use different information, different models, and provide access to credit to firms that would otherwise not have access. I think there's a couple of things that are also interesting. One thing I would like to mention is the idea of an emerging API market, right? So this is something that is associated to how we interconnect with fintechs and other firms, and generate an environment that is safe and allows for safe innovation. This, in and of itself, is a case of use. And I would like to mention also the potential of modernizing at least part of governmental services of the public sector. So nowadays, there are a number of laws that require some kind of interconnection between a government agency and banks. And this, some of the most recent ones are associated, for example, to the payment of alimony or other things, tax rebates, a number of things that require this connection between governments and financial institutions. And it's tough.
Yeah.
And sometimes it requires an ad hoc solution, or it's associated with some type of operational challenge. And this is an opportunity to have a better interconnection between the financial sector and the government. And so it's also an opportunity to modernize part of governmental services. So I think there's a case of use which is likely to have a large impact associated to the public sector as well.
Totally. Alan, you mentioned key topics, governance and UX experience, right? Customer experience. Is there another functionality of the Openfinance system that we should, just to mention, that we should be aware of in the implementation phase?
I think there are. I just wanted to build on what Daniel was saying around government and interconnectivity, because I think what we're seeing is, as we move into a more digital world, there are more connections that need to be made. And just to build on what you were saying, one of the biggest use cases we've seen in PIS in payment initiation in the UK has been paying government. So paying your tax, that's not sexy, clearly, paying your tax. Nobody wants to pay their tax. But the last thing they want to happen when they try to pay their tax is it's really hard and it goes wrong. And they end up in a queue to the tax office on the telephone. And you know what it's like. I'm sure Chile can't be as bad as the UK, but you typically are on that phone waiting for a long, long time, which is the reconciliation issue. Now, typically, when you pay your tax in the UK, you get your demand and it gives you a long reference number and a sort code and account number or IBAN that you have to pick. You get any of those wrong or one of, I think it's 16 digits wrong, that will go to the wrong place. Now, everyone, I don't know, maybe 50% of people in the UK have to make a separate tax payment every year. That's a big number of people that could get that wrong. Open banking can solve that problem. And we've had one payments initiation provider coming into the market and solving that problem. And there are no reconciliation issues with open banking based tax payments. Massive improvement. The tax office love open banking in the UK, and government are looking to extend the use of open banking to other forms of government payment. But the sweet spot is beyond payments. We've talked about data, we've talked about payments, we've talked about all of these things together. The sweet spot is data and payments. And when you can put those two things together, you can really solve some really important problems. We were talking about COVID earlier around the cost of COVID. One of the biggest problems UK government had was fraud for COVID loans. How do you prove who you are? How do you prove you're entitled to a payment? We had what was called furlough payments when people couldn't work. The government was subsidizing them. So massive fraud issue. If you join open banking and the payments piece together, the data can help reduce that fraud. We're also seeing payments fraud where there's scams going on. People phone you up and say you need to make this payment. It's a PayPal payment, or you get a text. It's a push payment, authorized push payment scam. Massive in the UK, lots of regulation around it, but you can use data to help reduce the incidence of fraud. So there's a lot of working together across payments and data to solve problems. So I think what's interesting is we've discovered solutions as the whole ecosystem has evolved. One of the problems we have is we can't mandate some of these things, and they can only work sometimes if both sides play, right? So what we might need for reducing fraud is for PISPs who know the payee, who have a relationship with the payee, to share information with the bank sending the payment, or the sending bank sharing information with the receiving bank, or vice versa. Some of those things can really help resolve fraud. It's not about payments on its own. It's about the whole interconnectivity, identity, payments, and AIS, all that information in the bank account can significantly reduce fraud, whether it's government and social security payments, pension payments, or COVID payments, or if it's actually fraud that the consumer is being hit with, we can reduce it. So just wanted to make that point. The other point around functionality, of course, governance is key. And we're having to think through collectively what post-implementation governance looks like, which is the challenge. But I think the other thing is you need a trust framework to bind this together. What is that trust framework? How's it going to work? Who's going to run it and make sure it works really efficiently?
I think that in that issue, Solange, we can have your view. The Openfinance system is in Chile, Isabel was saying that it's in a critical phase, that it's the implementation phase, because we need to be successful in order to access what is already written very beautifully in the law, but it's not reality, right? So Alan has pointed out governance is very important. Maybe there are other issues that are sensitive, or maybe could be led to a conflicted dialogue, like maybe the existence of a central infrastructure or common financing by the actors of the financial market can you tell us about your view in those issues, governance, common financing, and maybe the existence of central infrastructure?
Yeah, lots of challenges, of course, and not just in the implementation phase, but also in the post-implementation phase, because as I mentioned, and it has mentioned in the panel as well, it's an ongoing process all along the way. And in terms of technical standards, I agree that there is a lot that's being done already, and it seems to be, at least from what we have learned, that it's less controversial somehow. But when getting into the consent space and what's going to be the consent mechanism, things get a little bit more tricky, or what type of information that's going to be shared. That is something also that's kind of tricky, or the cybersecurity standard. Maybe someone would want like a very highest standard, but then it gives everyone out. So those are the cases that we think that it's going to be more controversy, and we need some sort of dispute resolution mechanism for those things. And during the implementation phase, it might be just the rules that we are going to issue in order to organize the system. But as this is going to be dynamic, we would need some alert system that will bring up what things are turning out into be an obstacle for the development of new type of information to be shared or new services to be provided. So again, this is not just the implementation, but I totally agree that's going to be the post-implementation, and that depends a lot on the governance that we can give to this system moving forward. So we would need to give the system enough flexibility and institutional arrangement in order to have this type of conversations between the private and the public sector, or the regulator in our case, to have continuous improvement. What kind of things we are going to have to agree on? We have to keep an updated dictionary somehow, API specifications, what is type of technical platform in which this is going to be worked with, API architecture, interoperability. That's also going to be an important issue. The degree of centralization of registries, we also think that that's going to be an issue, of course.
Because it requires finance.
Because it requires finance, and at least it requires an agreement between the parties, and how that finance is going to be shared between the participants. Who's going to pay for it? That's a big issue. Information security and risk management standards. That's also something that's going to be subject to controversy. We can expect there be controversy on that, but we hope we're going to get agreements between all participants. The open finance, the implementation of it does not depend only on the regulator. It depends on all of us to move forward and get something that would work.
Thank you very much, Solange, and everyone here in the room. I think we're over the hour. I'm quite sure that with joint efforts, we're gonna let successful open finance system implemented in Chile. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you. Well, after this riveting panel discussion on open finance and its profound impact on the financial sector, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to our panelists for their insights and perspective towards the transformative potential of open finance in reshaping Chile's financial landscape. Now, I'm delighted to announce next activity, a visit to the renowned London School of Economics. We're honored to be joined by Mr. Mario Marcel, Minister of Finance, and Andrés Velasco, Dean of the School of Public Policy at the LSE. We look forward to engaging in an insightful visit that will continue to inspire and inform our discussion. This will be at 6:30 p.m., okay? And as we have come to an end to this dynamic and thought-provoking first day of Chile Day London 2023, we extend our thanks to all our attendees, speakers, and panelists who have made this day an enriching event. We would also like to express our deep appreciation to our sponsors, whose support has been instrumental in making this event possible. To our esteemed InVest board members who your dedication and vision are driving the progress of our financial industry, and we are grateful for your commitment. And at last, just two important announcements. After the event at the LEC, we would like to invite you all to join us for a relaxed networking casual reception at a traditional English bar called the Albany. You can find the exact address in the agenda or in the QR code that you have in your credential, okay? And we think this is going to be a perfect opportunity to continue conversations, forge new connections, and enjoy the friendship that makes events like this truly special. We look forward to seeing you all there. And finally, it is important also to remind you that tomorrow we will continue this discussion in Church House, a different venue located in the heart of London, right next to Westminster Abbey. So thank you very much for your attendance, your participation, and your commitment to Chile Day. See you soon, and thank you very much.